Welcome back to another episode of A Record of My Father. Here we are today going to talk about hospital experiences. So what's a hospital experience that you got on your mind right now?
I think it's funny that here we are. It's at the beginning of the year, and we're talking about all the wonderful things that have happened to us in the past. And what do we talk about? Going to the hospital.
Well, hopefully this won't happen this year, right? Because
Yeah, I
that's what
mean,
we're getting
we
at.
sort of look at it and say, well, I think what you do is you compare them and you say what was worse, what was this? Because I mean,
Oh
I
yeah.
had bad ones. I had
Hmm.
really, really, really bad ones
Yeah.
that I have visual. I mean, very, very vivid memories that I can go back to. I mean, I had ones that were not that crazy, and I say that I've probably been to the hospital 25 times, you know.
In your life
I
or just
I've
this
been in
year?
ambulance 3, 4, 5. I mean, 10 times, maybe.
I don't think I've ever been in an ambulance.
Really?
I don't think I ever have
Oh,
that.
wow, that's no fun.
No.
You gotta like really do something stupid where you can't walk,
Or
or
you're
you
having a
have
heart
to.
attack or something like that. That's what
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
do.
When I had the floating fragment in my spine,
Oh yeah, I remember
and
that.
I remember when I was screaming, and then did you cry?
I don't
I think
know.
you did. I
Probably.
thought you were like
Well, I was
crying
like
because it
8 years
was.
old, and I'm like, I think he's
I
having
know.
a
I'm
heart
not saying
attack.
you were like 30, but I
Yeah,
was in the room and I
because
remember.
men after the age of 10 shouldn't cry anymore. That's a rule. It's a
Right, I
rule.
know that. But
Never again.
you were pretend so you could cry, and I remember the wife looking at me, and it's like and and if it's anything to measure it against for any female listener out there, it's kind of like childbirth, or I guess, I don't know. I'll never know what that feels like. But I remember the fragment was moving around in my spine, and
Yeah.
it would move, and I was bent over, laying down on with standing, bent over at the waist with my arms on the bed, screaming like every 10 seconds in a cycle. 10 to 15 seconds. It was a cycle. And it reminded me of your mother when she went into labor with you,
Oh, wow.
because they go every 2 minutes, and 2 minutes is like when I don't know what the heck it is, but I remember calling me at work, and she goes, my water broke, I have to go to the doctor now, I think there's going to be, and then ah you know just like that, and then
Yeah.
I'm like, and I have one of my people that I work with there, Ruth, and she's like, I think you need to leave. And it's like, well, I got to go get my period. And she goes, no, you need to go now. And then she goes, well, it's not a big deal. I'm probably going to be able to go to the, and you were just like, what the, yeah,
Who is this?
that was, I don't know what it is. I don't know what happens. It's sort of like trying to squeeze through a canal that's, this freaking big, and you're this big, and, you know,
I had a big
body
head
has to
too.
change. And, you know,
Wow.
can you imagine if I grabbed your mouth and tried to open it up and pull a basketball out of it? I bet you would scream while you could.
I've tried to put an orange in my mouth before and it didn't work. It was
Yeah.
hard. Couldn't do
Yeah.
that. But no, I remember. Is that worse than a slip disc?
Uh,
Oh,
yeah,
it
absolutely. I
is.
mean,
A
I
fragment is.
have, because I've had the disc, I've had the
Yeah.
back surgery, I've had and up until the floating fragment. I mean, I'd been in the hospital before. We were going to talk. Remember, I told you about my first one when I went to the hernia. That was a cool
Oh,
one.
yeah.
But the worst one up until that point ever was I was walking, me and I think my sister were going down to Marumsco Plaza. I was like 6, and
I drove
I
past
have
that the other day.
and I have my hands going like this, and there's a piece of plywood, and I go like this, and this finger, I don't remember, it's probably this one. Yeah, it was on the left hand side because the plywood's on the left hand side. I got a splinter. It ran up the fingernail
Ooh,
all the way to the quick, right in the center.
the quick. Is that what they call the middle of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
finger?
whatever that thing is right there.
Cuticle, you mean?
Oh, yeah, cuticle, whatever the hell it is,
The
all the way to
quick.
it's the quick if you're a cat or a dog, but if it's a cuticle if you're a human.
I
So
like that. I like
I think
that.
I'd rather call it the quick because it was pretty quick.
It's the quick
And
now.
and
Definitely.
then it hurt. It hurt really bad. And I went home and it was bleeding just a little bit. And the wife calls the doctor. The doctor's like, we can't do anything about it. So I go to the hospital. Go to the hospital for a splinter.
I've
And
never
this
heard
would
of
have
that.
been like just when we just moved in, so it was probably like 1966. We went to New Alexandria Hospital, then the one I was born in, which was in Alexandria. And I remember going in, and the doctor looks at it and goes, "Well, there's only two ways we can do this." They didn't have an anesthetic that they could give a little tiny kid in his arm. They were either going to put me to sleep and take it out and take me into surgery, or they could cut it off with no anesthetic. Think about that. So then my mother goes like,
yeah, the fingernail
she's
off,
like,
yeah.
she has to pay for this, and we had no freaking money. And I knew she had health insurance, but it was minimal at best. And so it was like, well, we're gonna have to the best way. And they were like, if you put him to sleep, you got to do this. And he could, we had the stuff that we put him to sleep with at that time was sometimes dicey and all this other kind of stuff like that. So they sat me on a nurse's lap. That's how small I was. My feet came down to just below her knees. That's how tiny I was. And she held me like this, like in a grip.
Mm-hmm.
And another nurse held my hand and my finger. And the doctor had a pair of scissors. And he cut my fingernail off, one snip at a time. And each time he cut, I made that noise I made earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I made it so loud that my mother, who was in the waiting room, not back then, you didn't come in. She was in the waiting room. She heard me.
Wow.
And it was just like, and it
Cool.
seemed like it took 6 hours, but it probably took like 4 or 5 minutes. And they cut my fingernail right down the middle and over to the left, all the way off, one snip at a time. I think it was like 6 snips down and 4 snips over, or 3 snips over, but it was just like, and that to me was the most painful thing I'd ever had happen to me ever. And I remembered every single snip. I remembered every single scream, and I could feel the pain. I mean, to this day, I can do this and I can think about it and I can go, oh my God.
Wow.
That's how traumatizing that was.
Cuticle area too is so sensitive.
Oh yeah. Well, and also they would stick the needle, the scissors underneath.
Yeah.
And they would try to push it in as far as they could, which means they're lifting it off, which is like when you think about you're torturing somebody and you're ripping their fingernails off.
That's the number one thing I think of.
And I was 6.
God.
That's why I remember it. I remember that. I tell you, when I got off, and it was like within 2 minutes after they were done, didn't hurt at all. Didn't hurt at all. But the time frame that happened, when I got off, I looked at the nurse and she like had tears in her eyes. Oh my God. And I looked at her and I felt bad. And I looked at her knees, right below her knees. I had literally kicked the crap out of her. She had bruises all over, just below her knee. It was a horrific thing. And I just looked at her and I was just like, God, that was, see, so when I had it later, I thought, and through my whole life, I've had like things that were painful. I mean, I remember the ulcer. People think about ulcers and you don't think much about them.
But explaining that to me.
Yeah. Well, when I explain it,
wake up in the middle of the night as well. Gosh,
well, it's
dealing
like
with
somebody, you're asleep. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and some little tiny person climbs down inside of your stomach, goes down one of your little tubes here, and they have an ice pick, and they decide to pound it through the side of your stomach from the inside. And that's what it feels like. It's like somebody's pushing a nail out, and it goes woo, woo. And so you run around and you take your finger and you put it on there because you feel like the nail is going to come out, and you're trying to hold the nail.
What's so bad about those stomach things too is that I remember having IBS for many years, and knowing that it feels almost as if it's self-induced. And
Yeah.
having an ulcer as well. I have a friend
Right.
that has a couple ulcers, and he's like always talking about Zach. It's self-induced, so it feels 3 times worse than
Yeah.
anything else in the world.
Well, I mean,
Oh,
yes and no. There's certain
yeah.
people that are more susceptible.
Oh,
There's like
definitely.
certain
Yeah.
things that
I'm not
are,
saying
yeah.
they're always, but
No, no,
yeah,
no. But the
he
thing
was,
is,
yeah.
I was drinking a pot of coffee every day in the morning
That'll do
between
it.
6 and 8. For some reason, iceberg lettuce is just like the worst thing in the world for me, which makes no sense.
Really?
I drank all the
Oh,
time. I smoked cigarettes about a half pack a day. I mean, every single
trifecta right
thing
there. Yeah.
that and when I went into the doctor, he's like, these habits that you have, you can, we're gonna. They went in and they did stuff and they put
Well,
me on
even
all this
stress can do
medication.
it. Just stress
Well,
by
yeah, yeah, and
itself.
this also happened when I first started the business,
Exactly. Yeah.
and
That's what I was
this
getting
is the
at.
first year of the business when I had the ulcer, so there was maybe that had something to do with it too. Because where I mean, I remember I told you the days when you're sitting in there and you're like your day, your week 3 in the first month, and that's what the office sounds like.
Wow.
No, no phone, and it happens,
Worrisome.
and you come in and you work for 12 hours, and no one calls,
Hmm.
no one, and then you start
Terrifying.
to say to yourself, was this a good idea? And that's where the stress comes, and
Oh,
that's where
without
I
a
think it
doubt.
gets into your stomach, and that's where I think it happens, and
Yeah.
that's the whole, that's yeah,
Yeah. The
that was that.
microbiome is really an interesting thing in the sense that you can control it based on what you eat, and your emotions are directly derived from what you eat at what time and with what consistency as well.
Yeah. Well,
And it's constantly changing.
remember now when you have a thought about a topic that you can go to this thing out there, WebMD or anybody, and you can look and you can read all this stuff and learn all about it.
You have cancer. Yeah.
No, the only thing I could do was, Al, it hurts. I could call a doctor and he would give me a list of 6 pages of crap to read that were sold to him by the pharmaceutical company, or he learned in a medical journal. I don't know. Or I could go look it up somewhere at the library. I mean, but there wasn't any place that you could figure out what was wrong.
Mm.
You could just speculate,
That also kind of just makes it way
and
worse.
that in itself, you know,
Way worse. No,
well, it's also horrible now. It goes the other way because then you go onto
you're
WebMD and
overthinking.
it's, yeah, all of a sudden I got a headache. Do you know on the right side of your head, if you've got a pounding, that could be a brain tumor. You could have cancer and be dead in a week. And you're just like, holy shit. So there is a thing about information, but then it's like, how do you process it? Are you going to take that in and say that really makes
Would
me
you
want
rather know or would you rather not know? I think
to,
they're
me,
two different things. Yeah.
weirdly, uh, when you say no, I mean, I guess the question is, like, if you could tell me today when I'm in perfect health that I was going to die in 3 months, I'd be cool. I'd love that.
Oh, you would like to know that.
I would love to know. I would love to know that because then
Yeah.
I would prepare myself. There's things that actually I don't think there's anything I do because I'm doing everything I possibly can because I feel like I could die tomorrow.
You never know. Yeah.
I don't think about that. I just
With
think
your
about,
advanced age,
yeah, I'm 64. So for me, it's like I think about life in terms of that today is one day that I won't get back, and tomorrow is a day that I won't get back. So what I do in that day is, and that doesn't mean I have to do anything. I can just sit around and piss off, and read comic books. I don't, whatever.
I
But
started thinking
it's
about that more so. And the amount of
that,
days I spent hungover or not doing anything or
right.
not making an accomplishment in some sort of way.
Well, that's it. When you do something self-induced, when you get hammered and the next day you can't do anything, it's it seems like it's such a waste,
Oh, yeah.
And when you're 25 or 24, as in your case, you're like, wow, what difference does it make? But when you're 64, you realize that there's less days left than you had in the past than you had going forward. And see, when you got more going forward than you had behind you. I'm way
Maybe.
past that, you know.
Well, you also have to keep in mind that when you reach that age, there's less days to get hammered, right? So you also have to think about it that
Well, actually, well, the weird thing is I probably have, yeah.
there's less drinking days left.
Oh, that's
So
right. I should drink more because there's less days and less
I think
possibility.
that that's a better way to look at it.
I like
I
that
think,
idea.
I think that
So
that's
this is
fantastic.
how we talk about our hospital experiences.
Oh no, definitely. Well, I'll give you
Isn't it
one
funny how
too.
we drift? Yeah, give me one of yours.
Well, I was thinking about your fingernail experience and how you were saying that that was one of the most, or the second most painful thing ever, right?
Yeah.
My ankle, when I broke my ankle, it didn't hurt that bad. It really didn't. Like when I snapped it, I broke it at the
How'd you do it?
growth plate. It was skateboarding, and I was coming off of like a rail. No, it was like a ledge, like an angled ledge, and I rolled it, and it touched the other side of my leg, and it snapped the growth plate.
Yeah.
But it really wasn't that bad. Like it was throbbing,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't as bad as
Really?
like I had thought it was going to be, knowing people that had broken their ankles in the past. Maybe
Yeah.
shattering your ankle is different because this
It,
wasn't shattering. This was just
well, your Uncle
snapping the
Bert
growth.
has his broken in 3 places and the bone was sticking out of the skin. So
I didn't have that. I just had a
that
simple
he got
splintery.
helicoptered. So
Oh, wow.
yeah. But
What would that even look like? Just jelly ankle.
I he was on a couch for months. It was a
I
bad
was able to
experience.
walk. Yeah, I was able to walk
But
with a
he
boot
seems
on
fine now, you know. I kick him in the leg all the time, every chance I can.
every
That's
time
how
I
we keep
see
the
him.
relatives happy.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
no, it wasn't that bad. The recovery time was long though, because that's the either the first or the second
Where'd
most
that happen?
rehabilitated. That was Lake Fairfax Skate Park when
Mm,
2015, 2016.
yeah.
And
Oh,
that
9 years ago.
yeah, it
Oh
doesn't
man.
hurt that bad anymore. I think it's because I do the mobility exercises.
Do you know which one it is?
Which ankle?
Yeah.
It's the right ankle. Yeah.
Okay.
How
No.
would I forget that?
Well,
I don't
let
know.
me tell you.
If I broke both of them, then maybe
Let
I'd
me tell
forget. But
you. When we first started the company, probably in 90 or 91, we started a softball. There was a softball league, and we used to party at the softball league. It's so funny. And I slid into second base. I was usually the pitcher. I'd have a glove, a beer, and a cigarette, and the softball, and I'd set the glove down so I could pitch the ball.
when athletes were athletes, is what I
When
like to say
athletes
to
were
that.
athletes. Anyway, I hit the ball, and we were playing Whizbee, and Whizbee, for some silly reason, they spiked all the bags down. So I had a line drive to third base or something like that, and they got somebody out at such and such, and I rounded and it got through the infield, and I was running to second base, and I dropped and I slid.
Oh,
And I slid into second base, and my foot went into the side of the bag, and the rest of me kept going, and
oh,
that was the ankle going snap,
oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
I cracked the ball. Right
Oh,
now,
that's the
my
worst
pain
part, the crack.
experience was much different. My pain experience was I leaned on somebody. I could not put any weight on it at all. They
I
took
could
me
walk
over.
it off.
They took me over to a tree. I leaned against the tree. It was it was August. It was probably like in the 80s, maybe even in the low 90s. No wind at all. I swear I could feel the wind
Oh,
blowing over it, making it pulse. Now the weird thing is wife come gets me. People there help me get in the car. I don't know if we won the game or not. I don't remember. Which I know how important that is, and in a mural league, who gives a shit? But everybody else does. But we drank more than they did, so we had a better time.
that
So
always.
we won that. And then we went to Nova. Wife takes me in there and goes, "I think we better get this checked out," because it was already blue and black and bigger. It was twice.
Oh,
And then I go there and they look at it and they go, they took an X-ray, but they didn't have anybody there that could read the X-ray. So it looks like it's broken. And she goes like, "Well, let me give you a shot." And they gave me a shot of something. And it turned out it was what the heck was it? What's the
morphine,
what's the, no, it's kind of like morphine is a
Dilaudid.
Dilaudid. It was a derivative. First time I'd ever had it. But it was, X741 or some bullshit. They called it some weird name. And then she looks at me and she goes, "Oh, it's kind of opium," or something like that. The lady happened to be our next door neighbor. She gives me a shot of it, and I'm sitting on the gurney, and and she shoots it in my arm, and I feel this heat run over my body. It just first, it's like a waterfall. It runs down my arm, and it's just euphoria. And I'm not even to my head yet, and I look at my hand, and my hand was euphoric. It was just like
Wow.
my hand was happy. And then it started running around my body, and it goes through my whole body. And this is in the course of like maybe 30 seconds. It floods my whole body all the way down. And I was just like, it did that. And I was like, I don't need anything. I can go home now.
I can walk on it.
I could, yeah, it wouldn't matter. I could have done anything in the world then. And that's when I said, I hope I never get access to that drug, because my God, it was, if there was ever a drug, and I've heard people talk about heroin, and this is a derivative of heroin. So it's kind of like, I don't know, opium, heroin,
Well, I
one's
think
one.
Dilaudid is derived from laudanum, which is what a common drug in the Old West was. And I think they had to rebrand it because when you hear the word laudanum, it's scary. People don't want to buy that. But Dilaudid, I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like a chemical compound in which nobody knows what it is.
That was the first time I had it, and it was amazing. Now, fast forward to the spine, to when I'm screaming on the bed, and they get me in there, and I go to the hospital, and I'm just like, they lay me on the gurney, and 1, 2, 3, ah! I'm just doing this like every 10, 20 seconds, and it's not like I can control it. Just randomly. I mean, you saw it, and it was just like, can it calm down? And it's like, it's not, the spine is the fragment is touching the nerve, which is an immediate reaction, because it's your,
because it runs down your
system.
leg as well, doesn't it? To like your pinky toe.
It was the whole body.
It was just the whole body. So
it was the whole
body.
I couldn't delineate where it was coming from, because it just smashed me, and it was like the worst pain that I'd ever had. It was much worse than this. And when I did it, I screamed my face off. And I was doing this, and they came in and they hit me, and they go, we'll just give you some Dilaudid and I'll be okay. They give me a shot. 25 seconds. They go, oh, seems to, and then I screamed, and I did the same scream. They were like, oh, and then it passed, and it's just like, it's a scream, it passes, and it's like it's pressing and then moving and pressing and moving and pressing, and I don't, I don't understand it, but it's a bone fragment, and it's floating around in there, which you would think it wouldn't be moving when you're sitting still, but that wasn't the case, unfortunately. So it moves, and I scream, and then I'm like, not screaming. They're like, oh, you're okay. 1, 2, 3, 25, 30 seconds. Loud scream. Well, we better give him another shot. They gave me another shot, and then it was about every 30 seconds. And then, but the screams were louder because it was more painful for some reason, because it was sort of like in between was a more restful period, but the pain that came on was such a strong surge. It made me get louder. And they kept telling me to try to be quiet. And I was just like, I would if I could, maybe fur ball in my mouth or something. I don't know. Anyway, they hit me again. They gave me a third one. And then I was screaming about every minute then. And then there's like, they said, and that Valerie's there, and they're looking at me, and I said, well, can I get, what about something else? And it's like, well, if we give you any more, you'll die. That's what they said. They said, you'll die. And I was just like, well, so what can you do for me? And they're like, well, we can't really do anything. So, and you know what they said? Might as well go home. So I, looking at him, have had 3 shots. I should be just like I was before with the 1 shot. I get off the gurney. I bend over, because if I was bent in a certain position, it didn't hurt. That was the only thing. If I walked like I was.
So this isn't something that you would need emergency surgery for? I guess
I don't know. They had
so.
I'm sorry. They had X-rayed me. We'd gone through the screaming. We'd gone through that.
Okay.
I had the 3 shots of Dilaudid. It's like it was probably like well, any hospital stay, it had to be 4 hours, and it was at Fairfax, and
Only 4? You got out in
yeah,
4?
yeah. I think I got out in 4.
That's
Anyway, I get out.
shocking.
I go out to the hospital. I mean, I go out to the car, and it's hard to get in the car. And I'm now like, I'm in a position to where, when I was in a position that it didn't have to scream. But when I jumped off the gurney, they looked at me and goes, "We better get you a wheelchair, or you're gonna have to. You won't be able to walk." And I was just like, "I'm
I
fine."
feel like sitting would be worse.
And I was like, "But I'm fine." And I just walked out of there, and I was shocked by how straight I was. And I kept wondering, did somebody steal the Dilaudid and just give me freaking, sugar
They had
water or
an
something?
issue
I
with
don't know.
that at Yale. They did have an issue with that at Yale. But,
I was so curious because it had literally no effect.
wow.
But when I'd had it before with my broken ankle, it was like, God's saliva. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's not a good thing to say, but it was like amazing. It was the most amazing thing. And I'm like, man, don't give me that drug because I will be an addict. That is something that,
Well, that's funny that you mentioned the replacing with water, because there was a study at Yale where I forgot what it's called. It's not a hysterectomy. It's where women get their tubes tied, and it
yeah,
was found out that a nurse there was replacing it was some painkiller, some liquid painkiller. I think it was morphine or something like that,
yeah,
with water and selling it on the side. And a lot of the women that were interviewed on this podcast said that their pain levels weren't attended to, that they weren't allowed to use more morphine, that they should just suck it up, that it
yeah,
was something that was not in their reality. And apparently they didn't know how to feel pain, which
right,
is
right,
absolutely absurd.
right.
But it was found out later that maybe those people weren't being listened to because a lot of the nurses were replacing it with water and selling it.
Yeah.
I just thought
Well,
that was,
I mean, that have you seen the studies where they talk about black women in particular,
oh
black
yes,
people,
yeah.
women in labor that die because the doctors don't believe what they're saying?
It's a quarter more than
And it's
any
and
other
it's
race.
it's not just like, well, okay, Phil, you're trying to make up racist stuff, and it's like, no,
No,
it's
it's
like
statistically
it's
proven.
it's huge. It's a huge portion more that die from child labor than white people do.
We
Which
still have a really high level of women that die in child labor in this country still.
and that
It's
makes no sense.
alarming to see the
Yeah,
percentage, even in the
yeah.
day and age that we're in. It's shocking.
Wow.
It is very, very
It
alarming.
is sad. You think about the different states, and if you break it down that way, is it the healthcare? And that's the thing that always worries me when we talk about the hospitals and stuff. Is our health system really as good as we say it is? And when I talk to
Oh
people,
no, not at all.
I think that we have been sold a bill of goods that when the, you know 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, 80s, probably the best and some of the best in the world. However, it's deteriorated when they privatized it, and ever since I think the early 90s. And the doctors I've talked to have said the same thing, that as the privatization has happened, they've lowered the amount of dollar that you spend that actually goes to your healthcare and can go to administration. And now they've gotten, and it used to be 95 cents of every dollar has to go to your healthcare and 5 cents can go to anything they want, administration. And now I think it's down to
Huh.
80. But what's happening is the hospitals, the doctors, and not the doctors, but usually it's the administrators, they are looking to call things that are not for your health or for your health care. They're trying to call administrative duties your healthcare duties. So what they're doing is they're cheating. They're calling things that are,
Well, it
I'm an
sounds like a
administrator, but
dealership fee when you're buying a car. That's what it
well, the
sounds
thing is
like.
that's the thing that worries me when people say that healthcare is like, uh, when the private sector is tied to only making dollars over, they're not there to make you happy and healthy. They're there to make profits, right? They
No,
want to make
yeah.
you happy and healthy, and they would argue that yes, they do, and that's aligned, but they're not perfectly aligned.
And I wonder
There's a line.
if this is
There's a
rooted in the sanatoriums that were created
Yeah.
in the 20s. I often wonder if that's where we
Well,
started
yeah. There's
looking at
more of a.
luxury over. Yeah,
If I can not feed Zach 3 times a day, or feed him cheaper stuff 3 times a day, he's going to be mediocrely satisfied. But if he's a healthcare patient, well, he's coming in once every 5 years. I don't give a shit.
And a doctor too has a powerful position in which they can tell you anything and you believe it. And
Well, yeah,
that's something,
since my
including the
childhood,
board, the doctors that are on boards as well that evaluate who's going to be stripped of their licenses. Oftentimes there's a stipulation in which this person spent this many years at school, therefore we should really see how egregious their crime was before
Yeah.
taking away their license. And that
they say livelihood. They don't say license. They're very, you know,
livelihood, that which is
Yeah,
dangerous. Oh, incredibly dangerous.
but you have no problem putting somebody in jail for 5 years for stealing a candy bar from 7-Eleven. It's like,
Exactly.
really, you know,
Because they didn't pay
but
$500,000 for an education, apparently. I don't know. I think that's
whatever
ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's a ridiculous way to look
Well,
it up.
and
Beautiful
double
people.
standards are everywhere in society. It is kind of weird. And when we start to look at, I mean, in my lifetime, I've seen where I used to trust the doctor and trust the dentist. Now I'm skeptical when I go in because I've had so many experiences where they've recommended things that are, while they weren't absolutely necessary. And older doctors would say, well, you should probably wait until something goes wrong before you actually do something about it.
I believe that. I'm still
because it isn't going to make any difference.
Well, if you open something up, you open that thing up, right?
Right.
It's like I think about my knee and my meniscus, and it's like I don't want to have knee surgery because I don't want to open it up. Because as soon as you start tinkering around with things,
and we know people
it gets
with bad knee
little
problems.
weird.
Yeah.
It's a little weird. Yeah.
And you only get a certain number of shots. My back doctor he didn't want to operate. He was a surgeon and he didn't want to operate. He said, don't want to operate. It's like, why? And he goes like, well, you only get a few shots. And he said, so you want to do every single possible, you should go through therapy. I went through therapy. You should do this. You should do this. And it was
a long time. Yeah.
It was painful, you know, and he getting those needles in the back. The epidurals went, oh my God, that was painful. God, I know women do that for
directly into your spinal column. If I'm
not
mistaken.
Yeah. But not, I mean, I had one at the top last time. That didn't hurt nearly as much. The one in the base.
Because it's tighter. I think they're more.
I don't know why. They're
closer together because of gravity, I would imagine.
Wow.
Well, I think we're coming up on our time here. And it has been another great conversation with you, as always.
Yeah.
And look at this level of consistency.
Topic.
You see this level of consistency we're committing to?
I have no idea.
It's crazy. Let's just pat ourselves on the back because we're just so great.
Here,
there we go. There we go.
That's do that. Did you do that too? Great. You do that too.
No.
As always, we want to hear from the audience. Good, bad. Bad's kind of fun too.
You know what? Tell us bad. We don't want to hear good.
Snarky comments are greatly appreciated because that's what I love to do too.
I completely agree. Well, there is a Q&A section on the Spotify. Yeah. So if anybody has any questions,
did you see we're 5 stars?
I know. I did see that. We are.
I was like, holy crap! Somebody actually rated us.
Somebody did. Maybe multiple people.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just us. Like those kitschy little kitchens that are technically 4.98, but they're you've eaten that before, and it doesn't taste great. But thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next week.
Party on.